the way your deck should look when you're ready for action.
AFN Kwajalein remembers one of the most impressive amphibious military campaigns in history. Operation Flintlock, the code name for the 1944 U.S. invasion of the Marshall Islands, was an important land grab in the American forces' island-hopping campaign against the Japanese forces in the Pacific during World War II. In this series, we offer an overview of this chapter in Kwajalein Atoll history. Operation Flintlock as a whole was the responsibility of Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Commanding the operation directly under Nimitz was Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the 5th Fleet. It was January 1944 when Nimitz's and Spruance's forces set sail from America's west coast and Hawaii. The armada consisted of nearly 300 ships, the largest flotilla yet assembled for combat. On those ships were 40,000 Army infantry, Marine infantry, sailors, aviators, and support personnel. As they made the 2.5-week voyage to the Marshalls, the troops played cards, sang songs, and dealt with the dank heat of their transports the best they could. Meanwhile, officers and their men studied the intelligence gathered by photo reconnaissance flights that had taken place over the archipelago in the latter months of 1943. To the surprise of Japanese defenders in the region, the Joint Chiefs had selected Kwajalein Atoll, codenamed Caroline Atoll, for invasion. The Japanese had expected an attack at Jalwet or Mili, where their military fortifications were considerably stronger. But putting his attack where the Japanese least expected it was essential to Admiral Nimitz's plan in the Central Pacific. He would strike at the heart of the Marshalls to carve out air bases so that forces could move farther west to Chuuk and beyond.
We hear that it is a complex of heavily fortified islands surrounded by airstrips, with naval anchorages at certain spots among the islands.
On Kwajalein Atoll, the Japanese defenders consisted mostly of the following. At Roi, there were thousands of Air Force personnel of Japan's 24th Naval Air Flotilla. It was commanded by Rear Admiral Michiyuki Yamada, the highest-ranking officer on Roi at the time of the American invasion. In addition to 100 Japanese fighters still remaining on Roi, Yamada's base supported a submarine base, radar facilities, and a radio communications center and more. Headquartered on Kwajalein was the Imperial Japanese Navy 4th Fleet 6th Base Force, and thousands of sailors and some infantry. Commanding all Japanese personnel on the atoll was Rear Admiral Monzo Akiyama. Akiyama and Yamada would largely be left to their own devices as the Americans encroached into the region. In the latter part of 1943, General MacArthur's victories in the South Pacific had forced Japan to give up defenses of the Marshalls and Gilberts in the Central Pacific. Drawing its defense perimeter northwest toward Chuuk and the Marianas, the Empire had largely left Akiyama, Yamada, and their nearly 9,000 men on their own at the Kwajalein Atoll. The men would fight to slow the Americans' westward advance only. That was it. While some infantry reinforcements would arrive, along with replacement warplanes, it would not be enough. Many of the men, with little to no proper combat training, knew they would die for their country on these islands. The objectives of Nimitz's forces were simple: subdue the Japanese on the islets of Roi, codenamed Burlesque, Namur, codenamed Camouflage, Kwajalein, codenamed Porcelain, Ibai, named Burton, and dozens of smaller satellite islands with Japanese infrastructure, such as Enneber, codenamed Allen, and Begej, with the name of Bennett. Along with photo reconnaissance flights in the months leading up to the American invasion, many bombing runs from the now U.S.-held Gilbert Islands and Navy carriers had spent time softening up Japanese targets and destroying Kates, Zeros, and other planes on airstrips that were peppered throughout this region. Through the final months of 1943 and going into 1944, short frenzied battles occurred in the airspace above Kwajalein Atoll. December 4th, 1943 was a busy pre-invasion combat day. 246 U.S. planes took off from U.S. carriers to engage the enemy. On this day, at 12:47, one engagement rendered one of the most famous photos captured during World War II. While attacking the famous USS Yorktown escort carrier, a Japanese Kate is destroyed by artillery fire. Overall, at Quaj, of the nearly 30 cargo vessels anchored in the lagoon, 7 are sunk on this day. Finally, on January 29th and 30th, Nimitz's armada arrived near the atoll and split into two. The Northern Attack Force with the 4th Marines headed to roi-namur, and the Southern Attack Force with the Army's 7th Infantry headed to Kwajalein. Operation Flintlock was officially a go.